With reasonable confidence, I can say that you've spent too much on gear, but the problem is working out how much you should actually be spending. Now, I'm very fortunate that I have a very good accountant who also gives me very good advice. And what I've done today, I've done a quick interview with my accountant, and at the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to calculate exactly what kit you can afford based on your business. Because this is not an emotional decision. This is not a I want this. We're running businesses. What we buy is very much a product of what we make. Now, none of this is business advice or financial advice. This is just the way that I personally run my business. So I'm going to show you what I would do if I was in your shoes. But before we do that, we're going to jump into a quick call with my accountant who's going to talk you through the process that she's put me on to manage my money. Now, my accountant has very kindly agreed to do this free of charge, but in exchange for that very great kindness, now, in exchange for my accountant's time and to avoid any mid-roll adverts, she actually has a relevant product to UK photographers, and it's a digital download. So I'm going to let her explain what it is, and then we're going to dive right in before I show you how to work out what you can afford and what you can actually afford to buy. Let's get on with this. And then you have a digital download workshop, don't you?
I do. So that is it's for newly self-employed people, so it would work for photographers if you're just starting out, and it's really practical advice about for UK-based self-employed people. It's my 5 top tips for the newly self-employed, and you can get that on the OEC website, and it's www.theoec.co.uk/shop. It's £49 for the download, and you should get from that all the things you need to do as a newly self-employed person in the UK.
I've got my accountant here, who's Caroline, who is lovely. And Caroline is the reason for most of my sanity, because before I had Caroline, I did my own accounts. And as a creative, I'm definitely not an accountant. I'm reasonably business savvy, but I'm not money savvy. And I ended up doing the thing where it got to the tax bill part of the year, and I just assumed there'd be enough money in my bank account, which thankfully there always was. But at no point did I get to the end of the year and go, this is what my tax bill will be. And purchases as well throughout the year, I'll just go, I'm going to purchase this because I need it. Or this bit of kit's better than that one, so I'm going to buy this. And there's enough money in my bank so I can afford it. This works okay at a very small level, like when you're making very, very little money, but as your income starts to increase, like getting a £2,000 tax bill is quite manageable, but getting a £30,000 tax bill you're not expecting is not as manageable. And you may not, if you carried on living that way, you probably don't have 30 grand sat in your bank account ready for the tax bill. So I'll let Caroline explain this to you, but Caroline's got me onto a bit of a system to manage money, which is what we're going to talk about, I guess.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So the system is Profit First, and it's based on a book, which is here. I happen to have it. Is that backwards?
No, that's good. That's good. That works.
Yeah. So yeah, this book is written by Mike Michalowicz, and he's an American business owner. He had various businesses over the years and got into those situations that Scott just mentioned, of getting to the end of the year, getting a tax bill from his accountant and not having the money in the bank. So he actually sold quite a few businesses over the years, and he says that was why, because he couldn't afford his tax bill. So he was running successful businesses, but not on the money side. So he came up with this system himself for his business, and it worked, and then he has sold it. This is what he does now. So what the system does, it takes what Scott just mentioned there, which is bank balance accounting, which is what business owners do. Most business owners, most photographers didn't go to university and study accountancy, so you don't necessarily understand the profit and loss and the balance sheet. Why would you? I don't understand what a camera does apart from taking a picture. I don't understand the intricacies of it. We've all got different skill sets, haven't we? So he saw that business owners were looking at their bank balance and deciding from that what they were going to spend, and they weren't thinking about the tax bill in the future, or they weren't thinking about money coming in, what needed to go out. So he came up with this really simple cash management system, which is that you look at everything that comes into your bank account, all the sales income, and you split it into pots or spaces in your bank account, and 50% of it should be for wages, 30% for operating expenses, 15% for tax, and then 5% for a profit bonus. Every time I explain this system, I say the profit last, and it's called profit first. So I definitely shouldn't. But they're the percentages that I use for my business. Scott uses, I think, the same percentages, and lots of my other service-based business clients use these percentages, and they work. Whether you're a sole trader or a limited company, these percentages still work, because you're just looking at your cash. You're not worrying about what your accounts are going to look like. It's just cash management. So that's a big point to make, really, that people get, I think, overwhelmed by accounts and tax due. But if you're just looking at the cash, everyone understands money. And everyone, yeah.
And I think what's interesting, the bit which I didn't get, was the tax section at 15%. Because I was like, but we pay 20% on this amount, we pay 40% here, and then you pay 50% tax on this point forward. But of course, with your 30% operating costs, it actually balances out throughout the course of the year. So as you earn more, you also have more operating costs.
Exactly.
Now, of course, I guess if your operating costs are lower, you need more in your tax. You need to take it from there. But it worked out perfectly for me in terms of how much I owe. And I've always got slightly too much in my tax pot, which is considerably better than slightly not enough in my tax pot.
Yeah, and they're the percentages to start with. So if you put 30% into your operating expenses, but actually you're not spending anywhere near that much on your operating expenses, then you can borrow from that for your tax bill when it comes, because your tax will be higher, and the other way around as well. So the 15% tax saving is saving from income, not saving from your profit. That's where the difference is.
Yeah.
And yeah, it works for me. And my business is a limited company, and that tax, what's in that tax pot, pays for my corporation tax and my self-assessment as well. So
of course, I have the two different businesses. I have one sole trader, which is me as a creative photographer, and I use that in that system as well. And then I have my limited company, which is this YouTube channel, which I also use for this. And both of them, they work exactly the same. The overheads are completely different line items for that 30%, but it does work out at roughly 30% overheads. And I think this is perhaps where a lot of photographers go wrong in their finances, is that we live in a very gear-led industry. So it's little things like, I've got like a Rode microphone here. This is an okay microphone. There's a better microphone made by Shure, and it costs £400.
Okay.
Now, in years gone by, I'd have gone, there's a better microphone. I've got money in the bank.
Yeah.
Here's my better microphone. But now, I mean, I use a few different banks, actually. I use Starling, Metal, and something else. But for example, for the YouTube one, I use Metal, which works well for me. And I've got all the little pots.
Yeah.
And whatever's in the main balance is my 30% for operating costs. And I know what my monthly fixed overheads are, and anything left is to do things like buy paper, buy cables that break, all the really boring, like mundane running stuff. If there isn't £400 in there, I can't buy the microphone. Now I personally like to keep mine a bit more topped up because of rent and all the rest of it going out, but it's a very easy way to keep your spending in check, because having done a lot of one-to-ones with photographers, a lot of them are spending over 50% of their gross on operational costs, which of course includes like physical items like your new headphones or whatever it may be. And they're buying the kit and justifying it by saying they need it for the work. And that makes sense as a purely creative, artistic pursuit. If it's your hobby and you've got 10 grand in your bank and you save an account and you go, I want a nice camera to take nice, pretty pictures, go and spend 10 grand. But when it's a business, how would you go about looking at that? Would that all come from your running cost pot at 30% or?
Definitely, yeah. And what you do, so the way that you explained it there, Scott, that you only look at that, you just look at that money that's in your operating pot, and that's what you can spend on equipment, or that's your operating expenses pot. That's exactly what he wants the system to work as, because you're hiding away the other bits of money from yourself, which might sound ridiculous until you get into the system and realize how it works. Because what you're doing there, if you are spending over 30% because you're not looking at your cash management, you're taking money away from yourself, really, from your wages, and you're running a business, so you have to pay yourself, otherwise it's not going to be viable. Or you're taking away from the tax saving pot, which, like we discussed at the very beginning, that's pushing aside a problem for the future when you get a surprise tax bill. The other thing just to mention about surprise tax bills, or avoiding surprise tax bills, which I like to make sure my clients do avoid them, the surprise ones. Free Agent tells you how much tax you owe as well. So using the two systems, Free Agent accounting software and Profit First cash management system in conjunction, you should never have a surprise tax bill.
Yeah, and I like that, because I can literally pick up my phone. I used to have my phone number on the back of my phone. I've taken it off now because I kept showing it on the internet. But I can go into either Free Agent and go, let me just check I've done all my finances right. So I look in Free Agent, look at my tax bill for the next 12 months. I go into my Metal banking app, go into my tax pot and go, yes, I have that and a little bit extra in there. We're okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And likewise, with the big shock I had, though, was I went from having what I felt was a very healthy bank balance. When I looked at the bank balance in my account, I thought, oh, look, there's a lot of money. And then once you put it all into the pots, you go, there's £4,000, whereas I'm poor. But actually, I now go into it and go, well, there's all my tax. There's all of my salary. And because I pay myself so little, I'm on like £1,000 a month for living for my salary. I look at it and I look at the big number at the front of it. And however many thousand that is how many months of like living I've got without having to work again. And I find that incredibly joyous. So every time I do a big job, it's nice to go, right, if they paid me 50 grand, 25 of that is salary. So I've got 25 months from the commission for that job I just did. So for the next 25 months, if I don't get a commission, we're all good. A bit of MPB open in the background here. So we've got MPB, we've got spreadsheets. Because first of all, unless you're making over 200 grand a year, you can't afford new kits. And also, MPB don't sponsor these videos at all. It's just where I shop. This is the UK one. This is in UK prices. And we're going to assume you're the 24k a year photographer. This is gross. This is before anything comes out. And we're just looking at running costs only. How you spend your £1,000 a month salary is your own business. But this is where most people will start out for at least 3 to 5 years. It's very hard to leave this bracket of photography. So I thought this is probably the people who need the most help. And I also know from experience of the one-to-ones I run, these are the people who make the biggest financial mistakes. Now, this is not financial advice. I'm going to show you what I would do with this money. So when we look at this, let's look at the computers first. We can see that in 5 years' time, we'll have £1,500, which is enough for a MacBook M1 chip computer and a hard drive. But you can't afford it straight away. You've only got £300. You have to make do with what you've got. And each month of you making this money, you put this aside. That's what I'd be doing. I'd be going, right, I've allocated £25 a month. We put it into a pot at the end of year one. We've got £300. At the end of 5 years, we've got enough to buy a computer. I don't care how much you want that computer. You cannot afford it until year 5. This is how I run my business. Camera gear, £50 a month. See how similar it is to the computer kit? The computer's as important as the camera. It's just that you need more camera stuff. At the end of year one, you can afford £600. That's enough to buy a 5D Mark III. Now, if you've already got a 5D Mark III, brilliant. That means you've then got 2. If you have a really expensive camera, sell it and buy 2 5D Mark IIIs. It's a better purchase. By the end of 5 years, you'll have £3,000. So at the end of 5 years, assuming you just use the kit you have today, you'll be able to buy 2 5D Mark IIIs, a Sigma 50, a 100 Canon L, 4 Bowens heads, nothing else, second-hand off eBay. Stands, cheap ones, you're going to regret that at some point, but you're poor, so you can't afford more. And some modifiers. Do not, or I would not take a loan out against this. Chances are your business will go bankrupt. Always buy second hand, because in another 5 years' time, these are only going to have devalued by £200. If you buy a brand new mirrorless camera today, in 5 years' time, you'll have lost around £1,500. And that just doesn't make good sense, especially when the image quality is identical. I don't care what DxO marks say or what you think you can see. The client can't tell the difference. So this is a great setup to shoot worldwide ad campaigns. I know photographers who still use the Bowens 500 heads. I've still got the Bowens 500 heads. They're my backup lights for the broncolors. But when you're starting out, they're absolutely good enough. I shot a billboard on Bowens heads. I shot a billboard on the Canon 100, the cheap one, not the L1. This is the L1 in this budget. I've shot worldwide ad campaigns on a 5D Mark III. Do not start crippling yourself with financial troubles by buying new kit. There hasn't been a bad camera since 2008. The only reason I put the 5D Mark III and not Mark II down is because these are repairable, and that extra £100 in this 5-year bit is for something that breaks, or your insurance premium that you have to pay to get the repair done. Now these are very rough numbers. These are not exact science, but if we just go back here, so we've got £600 for a battered 5D Mark III. Oh, that's not a good move, is it? If we just go back to Canon R mirrorless cameras, £5,000. What's the cheapest one? That looks a bit plasticky. It is a bit plasticky. It's the R that's the cheap one. Okay, so you can get nearly 2 Canon 5D Mark IIIs for the same price as this, and you will have the exact same image at the end of it. You do not need to spend more money, okay? I cannot stress this enough. This is how I run my business. Now, my numbers are a bit different to this. They weren't at the start. At the start, my numbers were just like this. I ran the 5D Mark II, the 85-18 as a portrait photographer. That was it. That's what I did. That's what I had. That's what I used. Then I bought a second 5D Mark II. And then as we started shooting loads of volume, we got a third, a fourth, and a fifth one. But instead of going, I'll get a 5D Mark III, get a 5D Mark IV, we just kept buying the same one, even though it was old tech, because it was good enough and the price was brilliant. Rather than going, I need this camera to do this job, look at your budgets that you're going to go and make after this and go, I can afford this equipment to do these jobs. Spend a week on this and then leave it alone. You can fixate on this stuff and ruin your learning. You need to be focused on being a photographer, not what you can buy, but this is important information. This is what it should look like. Now, you can't afford a studio on 24K, yeah, just to be clear. But when you get to sort of 56 to 70, then you can start looking at that depending on where you're based. But at this point here, these are your overheads. This is all you can afford. You go and play with these numbers, make your own numbers, work out what works for you, and then sort of work out what you can really afford to be shooting with. I bet you the kit you're currently using is too expensive for your income. I'm almost certain of it.